Well, we're a minute past the hour, so we can go ahead and dive in. Thank you again for being here, everyone. For those of you who I might not have met before, my name is Alana Bell, and I'm the Residential Buildings Coordinator at NASEO. Thank you again for participating in this call series. Please keep in mind that we will be recording this as part of the long-lastingness of this call series. We're going to record each of our calls and have them posted on the residential page, the NASEO residential page, so we can keep them as long-term modules for you all to refer to in the future. Also, feel free to drop in some questions in the chat or raise your hand throughout our presentations. We'll have time reserved at the end of all of our presentations for Q&A, so we'll make sure to look back on some of the questions you drop in the chat at that point in the call. Just to quickly review some of the upcoming calls that we have and past calls that we've already had. Our first call of the series was on State Energy Office perspectives on multifamily affordability programs. The second on identifying multifamily buildings in need of improvement. And don't worry if you missed those. As I mentioned, we have recordings of those, and those are already posted on the NASEO YouTube channel. Feel free to reach out if you would like the direct link to that. I'll be happy to send that to you. Today, we're here for the multifamily resident and owner engagement call, and then our future calls in the coming weeks will be on benchmarking, project scoping, funding, financing, behavior change, and long-term engagement. So we look forward to having you all join for those. And now, I guess without further ado, I'll pass things over to our moderator, Ross.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Ross Anthony, and I am the Energy Efficiency Program Manager for the Maine Department of Energy Resources. If you've seen me present on calls in the past, you'll notice that the office is a little bit different. We were formerly the Maine Governor's Energy Office, but we were formalized as a department. And today we are actually celebrating our 2-week birthday. So still very young and still changing a lot of logos. So a little bit about the Department of Energy Resources, or just DOER. DOER leads energy policy, planning, and development for the state of Maine. We provide policy leadership, technical assistance, we develop energy programs, monitor energy markets, and report on heating fuel and electricity prices, among other activities. We work very closely with a lot of state agencies in Maine, as well as federal and local officials, industry, nonprofits, academia, and so on all energy-related issues. To that effort, a little bit about Maine and how we have some multifamily programming as it relates to energy. Unlike a lot of states in the US, we do not run our energy efficiency programs through utilities. We have a quasi-state agency called the Efficiency Maine Trust, and they are essentially an energy efficiency utility. They run all of the programs throughout the state, so it's kind of a one-stop shop up in Maine. So the Efficiency Maine Trust, or just Efficiency Maine, has quite a few different programs for energy efficiency. The typical gambit that you would expect for multifamily support, weatherization, HVAC, lighting, water heating, appliances. And we do have a lot of federal funding that we have aimed and dedicated at multifamily through collaboration with Efficiency Maine. For instance, under the Inflation Reduction Act, there was the Home Energy Rebates Program. There are two programs kind of within that, the home efficiency rebates and the home electrification and appliance rebates. One of those we currently have launched, and just an example of some of our multifamily programming is we have allocated a very large portion of that funds for new construction of affordable multifamily housing. So essentially, what is happening is we are subsidizing through this program the placement of heat pumps in new construction affordable multifamily housing, which is a really, really great concept because it allows the developers not to cut down on costs, but to build more since they do not have to worry about the HVAC as it will be incentivized by this program. Similar to Efficiency Maine, we do also have another agency that we work very closely with as it pertains to multifamily, and that is the Maine State Housing Authority. They have quite a few different programs. They're the implementers of some of the federal programming like HEAP and the Weatherization Assistance Program, LIHTC. And so, in collaboration with Maine Housing, Efficiency Maine, and at the time GEO, but now DOER, we've conducted quite a bit of outreach and engagement in the multifamily sector, doing things like holding summits to get the developers and occupants of multifamily housing together and say, hey, here's everything that we have available. Of course, Maine has benefited from being a small state when it comes to population. So we were able to convene a good portion of the multifamily sector all in one room in one day, which was incredible. I realized that some of the larger states will have a little bit of a harder challenge with that given population sizes. But that is enough about me. I would love to turn it over now to the good folks over at Anura Energy. I know that Britton is on. Has Nick joined Britton?
Hello. I think he may be trying to right now. If Alana or anybody sees him in the waiting room, he is he's trying to get logged on there, but he should be here in just a second.
Excellent, excellent. Is it okay if I go ahead and kick it over to you? I can keep talking about Maine if need be.
Um, well, I'm happy to jump right in. If you'd like me to share my screen, I can also get that loaded up here, and then we'll get Nick in on this as well. Oh, there we go. All right. I think if we're good with sharing the screen, hopefully y'all can see my screen.
Looks great.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Well, I'm Britton Wood with Anura Energy. I'm CEO over here, and Nicholas Wood is also on, so I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Wood. I'm Britton's husband, and I'm the executive director.
Yep. So I was just going to share a little bit about us. Why is this? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're Anura Energy. We got started back in 2016. We are kind of a combination of both a contractor and an implementer. We deal a lot with policy. We both have a lot of experience from kind of start to finish in terms of working with um, policy projects, the contractor side of everything, as well as working directly with utilities, working directly with a lot of the programs that offer funding and whatnot for projects. We offer comprehensive energy efficiency projects. We work with programs. We also specialize in income qualified multifamily, and we tend to work with larger properties. We're kind of focused a lot on those properties you might see driving, through the suburbs, probably past many of them, every single day. We're dealing with ones that are anywhere from, say, 40, 50 units on up to 300 or 400 units. Our specialty is in weatherization. We're dealing a lot with building shell improvements. We also focus on helping indoor air quality improvements related to that. We have also started getting into heat pumps and HVAC related electrification. And really our goal is just to be able to put together the most comprehensive project package that may be available for property owners. We are physically located in Illinois, but we do projects. We have done projects across multiple states, Iowa, Wisconsin, Colorado. And so we really just like to go where there's opportunities. A lot of the property owners we work with actually have properties across multiple states. So sometimes that's a good lead into getting into new states and that kind of thing. So that's just a little bit about us. I think I'm going to actually send it over to Nick, and Nick, I will deal with the slides over here.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of our work, like Britton said, it's with larger institutional owners. We do have a small amount of owners that are privately owned. And some of the nuances about engagement are very specific to that, where, the customers, typically get a lot of the headlines and billboards and advertisements directed to them. But entirely when we start talking, 50 plus units or a HUD or a limited income housing tax credit property, it's really the owner and many fewer times the property management company that may be managing turnkey are involved in that decision-making process. And so, there's a big difference on that customer class and subclass of who we're targeting and which types of buildings we're trying to improve. And a lot of times these real estate professionals, they may not even know their portfolio. That, they're just, this is an investment strategy for them. So the financials and the logistics of how the cash flow works for the project is really important. And so, as we have this conversation, it's really important to understand who that audience is. And if we start talking about customers and customer engagement, many times it's really about, a new technology. The last 3 or 4 years, heat pumps have really become much more of a conversation topic for a lot of the programs we support. And, obviously through the IRA and the HERE programs in the multiple states that are spinning out. So the customer education on the tenant side is really equipment, new thermostats, how to operate this, what it means to have a heat pump versus maybe a traditional boiler system in a family building, and how they interact with it. Probably our most frequent question is, my exhaust fan's not working, because the new exhaust fan is so quiet that they don't realize that it's actually working. And so just understanding the differences between the two and making sure that the program can really provide a path for participation for property owners. We may talk about some more details about that as we go on here. Britton, do you want to go to the next slide? Yep. And so when we start talking about multifamily, again, it's really regional and specific to the stock of buildings that we're talking about. Homes, multifamily homes in Illinois and Wisconsin look a lot different than Denver or maybe Arizona. And so understanding the deferred maintenance cycles, as well as the funding, most low income or affordable housing multifamily buildings are financed through some kind of HUD, Fannie Mae product. And so there are some green programs there. So if we're outside of the recapitalization cycle where they refinance the property, or the property has maybe changed hands where it's sold, a lot of property owners are very reluctant to do any upgrades because they really have to get their asset manager involved. They have to get their regional HUD director involved, and they just have to get all this team involved where they're really concerned about the day-to-day operations, not the benefits of taking advantage of this funding. And the property owners that do have green teams or initiatives to save energy, those are great to work with, but sometimes the program cycles are really challenging for some of these groups to engage with. We've been working with the IRA programs, and when it takes 3 or 4 months for an approval, sometimes that isn't a priority for that team in 3 or 4 months. And so timing is everything. Even though there are some great benefits for implementing these projects, it's really how we organize the projects if a project is viable and we can get that property owner's buy-in. Yeah, we talked about this just briefly. We see a lot of properties change hands frequently, every 3 to 5 years in a lot of cases. Some property owner groups hold properties, indefinitely. But that recapitalization cycle, and to get the best value for when they refinance, typically through a HUD or Fannie Mae product, is about 10 to 20 years, and or when their HUD contract renews. And so understanding the portfolio of a property owner group is really important, just to make sure our conversations are meaningful, as well as, talking about the cash flow cycle. In most jurisdictions and regions, the tenant is responsible for electric, and heating and or gas is, a central system. And so the property owner or management company is responsible for that. And so, accurately demonstrating a real number, not necessarily a modeled, number that could be inflated. What is the cash flow impact to the property management group or the property owner group is really important. Unfortunately, we see many times the property owners may, experience that split incentive feeling where, maybe the tenant is getting a HUD subsidy, and so there's a utility allowance. And, if we can save, 10 to 15% of their utility cost annually for a tenant, that may not impact the decision of the property owner, depending on the property owner group. So understanding how that cash flow mismatch really impacts deferred maintenance and real dollars that property management company or owner group has to spend has been critical at project adoption. And so, having good relationships, understanding what programs are available so we don't miss those opportunity windows is very important. One thing that property owners have been really encouraged about is comprehensive projects. I think we've all lived through the lighting craze with LEDs, and I'll come in and change all your lights for free is a common contractor pitch, or you don't have to do anything and we'll just do all the paperwork. And weatherization, building shell, air sealing, what we call a whole building retrofit, typically doesn't have that. It's much more of data collection, ASHRAE level 2 energy audits, with, maybe possibly data loggers, a lot of utility bill history requests, and then validation of that to make sure the meters are accurate, make sure they're right on the right billing codes. And so this is much more of a comprehensive approach where when property owners see this, they really see the value instead of, oh, I have a new widget. Or something behind the walls that should save me energy. They can actually quantify that. And now with all the benchmarking requirements in a lot of municipalities, this has become even more important. So they have the numbers, they have an energy model, they at least have a time in history where somebody has come, done a good inventory of their equipment, and given them an accurate report. And it isn't a sales pitch. It's really a comprehensive review of their property assets. And our last bullet there is, kind of a one contractor approach. And I think the IRA program really added this, and it's really great, where you can be an aggregator and you can have one energy efficiency expert, if you will, or company that understands energy modeling, understanding data requests, understanding, all of the requirements for various programs that we're braiding together, as well as HUD and some of the other, programs that these property owners have to report to, so that that one aggregator, if you will, or general contractor can bring in all the support contractors, electricians, engineers, weatherization contractors. Every project we've ever been involved in, which we touch about 10,000 apartment units a year, just with our organization, there's health and safety, as Britton said, lots of moisture and water issues, lots of structural issues. I think we do more drywall repair than anything, especially in bathrooms and kitchens. And so that one contractor that can implement all of that is really important to these property owners, so they don't have a great new boiler, but the ceilings are still falling down, or a scenario similar to that. Okay. And to continue with the contractors, we experienced this in multiple states just in the last 8 months, where we have contractors that are very interested in doing one measure. We'll do the electrical panel upgrade, or, we can put in a heat pump. But really, these systems are so integrated these days, and these projects are so comprehensive, even for the single family or townhome style of multifamily properties, that coordination between contractors is very key. And to have one organization to do that, a lot of these property owners, do a lot of construction, they do a lot of remodeling, but a lot of times they do bring in an outside firm if they have a holistic retrofit. So, we have found when there's one general contractor, even if, our organization is not the general contractor, is really important, so that relieves the burden from the property owner and the property management group, and to make sure that all of the paperwork, all the documentation, everything is in place. Some of these properties do have federal funding, and they may not have a strict, um, pay requirement for the employees, although they do want you to follow prevailing wage and do the reporting just in case. So, not a lot of organizations are familiar with that it's an administrative burden for a small contractor. And it's very far and few between when you find a single family contractor that may be doing, 50 or 100 single family homes a year with their crews to translate that work experience to multifamily. And so, you know, the general contractor model, larger projects, we have found to be pretty ideal. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so, training is key. I think we've all heard that over the years. If it's on site, if it's in a classroom, if it's online, we just can't have enough training for contractors, both with practical application, standard work details, general energy efficiency, but as well all the new technologies. There's lots of new switches. There's lots of new breaker panels where we can, we're not required, we don't need to do electrical panel upgrades to maybe put in a heat pump and a heat pump dryer. It can do some switching even with a electric vehicle charger. And so lots of training, and a lot of this technology is new to these contractors. You may have an HVAC company that's decades old, but putting in a new inverter heat pump in a cold climate is not the same as a 92% gas furnace. And so that training and onboarding pipelines just have constant workforce, and with a skilled labor shortage, it just needs constant attention.
And I would also add, the administrative capacity is also about all of the paperwork. That I'm not sure we can ever get away from all of the paperwork required for the different programs, but certainly trying to make that as streamlined as possible. I feel like I'm definitely an expert at filling out all kinds of paperwork, and I realize there's a lot of contractors out there that I don't think have the capacity to deal with that. They don't have administrative support. They don't necessarily have the data collection technology and methods to be able to put that all together. So that is another layer of this as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, if you just do a Google search, you'll see that there's been an enormous amount of new startups and companies offering, what we call bridge financing, prepayment for rebated projects, and, reassigning rebate to a financial institution. So, pardon me. So a contractor can get, maybe 30%, 50% of the project cost, or the project rebate, excuse me, up front to do the project. While they're waiting on, the rebates and validation, or, if it's energy savings where we have to check the meter, 12 months later, that's a lot of cash flow burden on a small contractor or even a large size contractor. And as your project grows in dollar amount or complexity, that just scales with it as well. So, annual resets, changes in program funding, the words that are really difficult for contractors are subject to change at any time. We personally had 3 different programs over the last 3 years, that have had, 20 million plus a year in funding. And then it goes. And so that all the pipeline and all the contractor engagement, is really for nothing, and difficult for customers to come back from that and re-engage in programs when they lose confidence, abruptly. We all understand cycles and fundings, state and utility funds, but we've had, an increasing number of, clawbacks or rakebacks and things. And so customers are very concerned about that, to engage in a project and being left, having to pay that rebated amount when that was part of the financial stack for a project. Yeah. Yeah, like I said earlier, comprehensive projects are definitely more appetizing when we can do building shell electrification measures, and do, a whole building approach, like, building science we've been preaching for, 20 years. But really, the technology is there where we can electrify intelligently most buildings and really take advantage of some of these new technologies, and as well provide the reporting at a portfolio level for property owners for it to make sense, and they can basically recapitalize at a higher asset value. And so, giving property owners that information is really important for their decision-making process when they see the light at the end of the tunnel and it's just not another project on their site. Um, you know, Giving access to property owners and options. So it's just not, one implementer or, one large contractor in a region, which again really stems from, having contractor registries, cross program, promotion, braiding of programs, which, has challenges, beyond just the contractor side. But those are definitely much more appetizing for property owners when they have options. And like we talked about before, bridge financing, funding options, just to reduce the cost of, implementer or a contractor running these programs, at a project level is pretty key. That is, the number one reason that projects that we have seen don't go through. It's just very complicated to pull in CPACE or another type of funding source from the outside or reassign rebates, and HUD sensitivities around CPACE and things like that. So there are some challenges that on paper it looks like a great opportunity, but once we dig into the financial stack, it may not be. And so there are some ways to improve in every customer class something different. Simplify documentation, use best resources. There's lots of data platforms out there. And just make sure we extend participation, beyond housing authorities, which are great participants in these programs and have been for a long time. But there are a lot of HUD properties and nonprofits that are also providing affordable housing to low-income individuals. And so, just extend that participation time so those individuals can participate, really provide some really great projects that can impact a lot of these families. And, contractor and administrative readiness, again, lots of training, lots of information. We've been very active in the Wisconsin market in the last year, and the training has been really great. A lot of stuff on YouTube, weekly trainings, a lot of braiding with the existing programs in the state. And so that has been, new to our participation, across multiple regions. And so again, just keep the contractor training, because even on the contractor and implementer level, there's turnover. So just because, training was offered in the spring, that whole staff may have turned over in that organization, by the time winter comes along. So just that constant administrative readiness and making sure that we can guide customers into participation is the key to implementation as well. Okay. I do want to leave some time for questions. So I think we'll wrap up here. Um, the multifamily owner can be a very complex persona. A lot of times they're real estate professionals. A lot of times they're hereditary, where maybe they've inherited these properties or they've inherited this portfolio as an investment. Training and support structures that empower contractors is great. And then just making sure that there is a feedback loop. A lot of times programs do offer roundtables and trade ally trainings, but sometimes the answers to those questions or improvements aren't shared back. And so that puts the contractor or the implementer of a project in an odd spot, because they're the ones that are really working with the property owners and the tenants, and they're kind of stuck in the middle. And it creates a situation where it's the program versus the contractor and the program implementer. And just the more information that can flow, I think that relationship just goes hand in hand so much better when we can organize that. The deep energy retrofits, it really just takes everybody working together to do it. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of phone calls, a lot of the same phone calls. And it's just, capturing attention of the decision makers and making sure that we have the information to move forward with great projects. And so a lot of times the incentives are very, very important to kick this off, but it's all the details is what makes a project successful. It's not necessarily always just the level of incentive would be a takeaway. I guess, Braden, would you have anything to add?
No, I appreciate that. When we're talking about engaging property owners, I think I don't know if we have a magic sauce or something about it, just able to really connect with folks and help them see that there's a lot of value both for them as well as for their properties and for their tenants. And certainly we see a large spectrum of how much where somebody may be and where a property owner is or a property management group is. But we really try to impact as many individual residents and as many buildings and properties as we can. And these are some of the ways that we think could be modified moving forward, or opportunities for all of us to continue working together. But that's all we have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick and Britton. I really appreciate that, and a lot of really great information there. Before we jump into Q&A, I do want to turn it over to Abby from Elevate Energy.
Great. Thanks, Ross. I'm going to share my screen because I have a few slides. I really want to kind of thank NASEO for this series, and the presentation with Anura was great. So thanks. Hopefully this will be a follow-on with some complementary information. So as I'm figuring out how to share my screen. Great. Can you all see the screen? Is that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me just put it in presentation mode. Maybe it looks a little better then. Great.
Looks great.
All right. So I'm Abby Corso. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Elevate. Elevate is a not-for-profit organization. We focus in the Midwest and in the Pacific Northwest. We have a team of about 260 staff. We're 25 years old, and we have been working in affordable multifamily buildings for our whole life. It's kind of in our DNA. We were started as a small energy co-op in Chicago back in around 2000. As a mission-based organization, we are focused on climate equity and ensuring that individuals and communities have access to clean water and clean power. So I'm going to talk about our multifamily programs. We work in both single family and multifamily, but the majority of our programs are focused in multifamily housing. I just wanted to show a couple pictures and examples of the programs that we're running. These are predominantly our Chicago-based programs, where we're working mainly through this multifamily energy program, which is we're on the team to administer the ComEd low-income multifamily program. And this is a large program. It brings about 50,000 units a year through this upgrade program. It's a prescriptive program. And that translates to about $38 million in incentives, and of which $17 million are administered by MWBE contractors. Kind of extending out to this, we administer some of these other programs so that we leverage these incentives into smaller, more community-based programs that use the same holistic, whole building upgrade formula, but are really tailored to kind of the needs of those communities. Again, outside of Chicago, we run really similar programs, mostly smaller in size. While we do focus on, subsidized buildings, such as like a project-based Section 8 portfolio or low-income housing tax credits, We, by and large, run many programs in naturally occurring affordable housing. So these are unsubsidized rental. They are affordable based on the income of the residents, but most are in either nonprofit ownership or in private ownership by kind of small developers and investors. And we really feel like that's an important sector to focus on. And because in any community we're in, if you look at the whole portfolio of affordable housing in that community, more than 50% of available affordable housing is actually naturally occurring affordable housing. So it is these small buildings that that are, home to many of low income residents. And this is just a flavor of all the different building types. I appreciate the comment by Anura that building typologies really vary by community. This in the lower left is a very typical Chicago style built masonry building. Upper right, this is a really typical, multifamily. It's a duplex in this case in Madison, Wisconsin, or in a community in Dane County where Madison's located. And then we have everything in between. We also extend our work to tribal housing, which again is different in subsidy and how it's managed, and ownership structures vary. So in all of these projects, we use a consistent program design framework. There we go. We use a consistent program design framework that takes a building from outreach to portfolio, like we analyze and benchmark the building, energy analysis, project planning and financing. We work with contractors, so we do the construction bidding and construction oversight. We manage the QA/QC and rebate submissions. And then whenever possible, we do ongoing monitoring. So our customer journey is really, this is the journey the customer's on, and we try and make this as easy as possible so they have a single point of contact. Even though we have energy analysts coming in and out of the project, we have construction managers, and then we have contractors. I think because multifamily building owners, especially NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing owners, they're really busy. You need to take the hassle factor out for them. And they typically, if they have upfront capital, it is limited. So really the activity around project planning and financing is a critical component where we do spend a lot of time leveraging other programs. We spend a lot of time, helping identify capital sources. And because we really feel like a lot of this work has to be done, we've also spent a lot of time raising philanthropy to kind of sweeten it for building owners to, to make the choice to upgrade their building an easy one. Just to kind of talk through a couple of the very typical barriers I think we see in all programs is there is often a limited awareness of programs. And this is especially true with the smaller buildings. There's really not, building owners, they know what they pay the utility, but they really haven't benchmarked their energy use. There's really not a lot of information for them, or like what is a cost-effective efficiency upgrade? What is a cost-effective electrical upgrade? This is really a critical stage because this is where we also analyze the utility bills for the residents whenever we have the data. And it really creates the direction of the upgrade for us. I think if we're only doing efficiency work, weatherization work, it's usually pretty straightforward. However, when we get into a building that is electrifying, so is maybe changing their HVAC, an old HVAC system from gas to electric, it's really critical that we are able to, have insight into resident bills and how that upgrade will affect the resident utility bill. Most of our buildings in the Midwest on the electric side are individually metered at the unit level. So if we're typically adding electric heating, many of our buildings do not have cooling, so we're also adding cooling with that, and we're increasing our energy load. So it's really critical that we understand the effect on the resident bills, because often with these buildings, if it is going to increase the kind of energy burden, we either have to seek a remetering. How do we remeter the building into a centrally metered building, or how do we add solar to that building to bring those electric bills, either keep them cost neutral or bring them to zero. So that is kind of a critical piece for us, because we typically would not want to electrify a building if it's going to adversely affect resident bills. Again, this access to low cost capital is pretty critical, especially for our smaller owners. And then we just manage the whole construction process for them. It kind of removes the hassle factor. I do appreciate Anura's comments around contractors. In many communities where we work in, there's either no contractors, or the contractors are really, really busy and they'd rather be working, in maybe not a utility program, because it's easier for them. So we do really have to also design the contractor engagement model with alongside of the building owner and resident engagement model, because we want to keep good contractors in our programs. We want to, be able to engage minority women, veteran-owned businesses in these programs to help them grow their business in the clean energy sector. In all of our programs, though, we use that kind of example whole building framework, but we really spend a lot of time customizing the program, either for a state or utility or a municipality, because of like the different building typologies, the different building financial structures. Is it subsidized versus unsubsidized? And then the income level of the residents. And because we're really wanting to make a connection with resident engagement in all of our programs, I just wanted to kind of show this. This is not a program Elevate is running. One of our partners runs it here in Dane County, but I think it is, I love it. It's a great opportunity for deeper resident engagement that can live side by side with a building upgrade program. And this is a resident train the trainer program, where working with the building residents to help them, better understand kind of opportunities in their building, and really kind of engage the residential community on, what are building upgrades? How will this building upgrade affect them? And get them, just generally engaged in the process. So that's all I have for you today. I'll stop sharing and looking forward to some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Abby. So just going to take a look at the chat to see if we have any questions from the audience. It looks like we don't right now. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I have a couple of questions for the group. The first is talking about barriers for engagement. And this is a bit of a two-parter. I'm kind of combining these questions. So what are some of the greatest barriers for either resident or owner engagement? And how have you really worked to overcome these barriers? I'm particularly interested in this one. Maine as an entire state has, we're 50% of the Chicago population. We're 35% of LA, 15% of New York. We're a pretty small state. And so I know that you work across different jurisdictions, different stakeholder sizes, and it might not be as simple as getting everyone involved in this sector in a ballroom, which Maine was capable of doing given our size. So what are some of the barriers for engagement? It's such a large and diverse sector. So very interested to hear what you all have to say.
I'm happy to get started. I think our two primary barriers are just sometimes limited awareness of programs. They just, some owners are busy, they just don't know what's available to them, and they need somebody to just help aggregate it and show them the whole picture. And I think the other really is first cost. And this is really true with our unsubsidized housing, which tends to be in smaller portfolios and owned by smaller development companies and owners, is that if we can help them, get them some upfront money to start to help with payment, a down payment for some of this work, we find that they're more ready to engage. And that includes maybe a grant that we pay contractors with and access to free technical assistance.
A couple of things I would add, just because we've been recently looking into this, talking about engaging with residents. We've been running into a lot of language barriers, just a lot of the communities we go to, very diverse, and sometimes populations, majority of population there that it may not be non-native English speaking. And so we have tried to kind of integrate that with our workforce so we can have maybe some translation that happens. Certainly if it's in the moment, ChatGPT on your phone can translate pretty quickly. But that is one thing that we've been running into a little bit. I guess just speaking to maybe something that Abby had brought up as well, is that a lot of the owners or maybe property management groups who could be making the decisions here, they are very, very busy and they have a wide variety of priorities. So even though this may be a great opportunity for them to do some capital improvements, they're dealing with a system changeover for their, resident portal, for example. They have other things that they're needing to deal with, and they don't want their on-site staff, property managers distracted by anything that a project may bring. So those were just a couple of things that popped to mind with this question.
Yeah. Yeah, if I could jump in, Ross, I do think there's different levels of engagement. I know we're talking about multifamily and tenants and a lot of building owners because they're, the main decision makers probably we all work with more specifically. But just like Britton said, one complaint from a tenant that they didn't have a good experience or they didn't understand why somebody was going to come into their kitchen and change their exhaust fan and put all this plastic up and scare their children. A lot of these individuals and families, they're living in sometimes triage mode. Maybe it's transitional housing, maybe there's some mental health issues, there's definitely financial issues, and so they have stressors outside of my property owner wants to improve my building. And so having that during the project is just as important as up front of getting everybody in the ballroom and saying, hey, this is how we're going to fund this and these are the benefits for a property owner. But to reach those individuals, it's handshakes. It's going door to door. It's lots of lists. We've done every approach over the last 15 years of, call lists and building operator groups and all of this kind of stuff. but it's really just building a network of people that have been through a similar program. They have a friend, they transition from this, nonprofit to this nonprofit, and they're managing these assets now, and building those relationships. And so you can just build on the success of previous programs and continue that. But it really is day to day. You don't want to cause complaints, so you have to explain what you're doing to the community so that doesn't become a burden to the property managers and the property owners, ultimately to discourage future projects. And so you're really only as good as your last project, it feels like sometimes.
I suppose
Absolutely.
just a couple of other ideas I'll throw in there just because we have it happening right now. But we have talked about, having little contests like, hey, who will, you get a $25 gift card if you have the cleanest bathroom for the day, if we're going into units, for example, just because that's something that can certainly slow our staff down if we have to move a lot of things out of the way. Another thing kind of to play onto engaging with the tenants. Actually, tomorrow we're going to have like a little ice cream party where it's sort of a thank you to the community that we've been on their property for a long time. This is in coordination with the property has like a homework club, so the kids in the community can kind of have a space to do homework. So we're lining it up with that, and who doesn't want ice cream? So those are some of the things we do try to integrate into our actual like on the ground experience, so that is a positive experience both for the individuals, the tenants and the residents, as well as the property management group then says, oh yeah, they're great to work with. We're going to work at the property across the street as well.
Absolutely. I love the idea of the ice cream party. What a great way to really get everyone in the room and thank them for all the time that you've spent there. So I'm hoping you all can provide some examples of, with this engagement, whether it's with residents, owners, or developers. We usually get feedback when that happens with that engagement process. How has that feedback really shaped or changed the design or implementation of a multifamily energy project you've worked on?
Yeah, maybe we'll go in opposite order this time if that's okay. We've implemented programs, for utilities and states as well, energy offices directly in municipalities. Unfortunately, that feedback that's formally, letters or even weekly, how was your assessment? How was your project, from trade allies or the contractors? It comes in a little late to do much with it in real time. I think it does impact, program evaluations and, future programs, the day-to-day conversations of, weekly check-ins, with maybe small trade allies or small customers, from the program implementation staff, I think is really key, and just really having your finger on the pulse of how did that project go? Really tell me how that went, and there's no consequence, to future projects. I feel like we kind of bait ourselves a little bit with some of those surveys and we all get 5 stars, right? And so having just a real connection with the property owners, that's why we're a huge fan of local programs and, local communities. Like I really liked what Abby had there about, train the trainer and that community involvement where, unfortunately you have to be real, and, meet these folks where they're at, whatever term you want to use, but the way to any parent's heart is through their children. Ice cream, having a good experience. Yes, we'll move our cones. And then that all trickles up to the property owner, because the program cycle, you work with the property owner, you start implementing the project, you don't ever see the property owner again. They might not be in the same region. And then at the end, how did it go? Great, close out. And so the whole life cycle of the real turn the wrench, as we call it, is the tenants and the property management company. And so again, I think just frequent check-ins, make sure it's a safe space to actually, hey, that didn't really go good. Hey, they stepped through our ceiling, or, hey, that boiler was down for 2 days and we're out of hot water. We have families here. Just to get the real feedback, I think, again, it goes down to the relationship and just constant touch points. And that improves it in real time. It's just instant change. Something has to change in the moment, because we're just so connected, and the property, decision maker or boots on the ground aren't afraid to have that phone call, is what we've seen to be real successful in those smaller programs.
Yeah, I think that's true in our programs as well. I would add we because we run, programs across multiple geographies as well. We do internally, like on both on the technical side, our teams convene regularly so that we're comparing notes. Are we seeing more gas leaks? Are we, seeing electrical panels upgrade needs differently? I mean, how is our supply chains working? We've had a hard time getting electrical supplies, like many people. So we do a lot of technical sharing, just to continually to improve the delivery of the programs. And then we do evaluate, where we are with programs and what kind of feedback we've gotten from the community. Like, for instance, in our Efficiency Navigator program in Dane County, we were asked, can we work in 2 and 3 unit buildings, which in Wisconsin are not typically considered multifamily. And but this is a multifamily program. They operate like, larger multifamily buildings because they're rental. So we were able to adjust the program design. And yes, it's a little bit more work on the back end because now we're braiding through a couple different, single family and multifamily incentive programs. But for the community, it was really critical that, we didn't leave behind those like 2 and 3 unit buildings.
Excellent. Very much appreciated taking a look at time. I think we have, I have a lot more questions, I'll put it that way, but maybe we can just do a really quick, 30 seconds. How can state energy offices really best engage in the multifamily space, whether it's on the resident side or the owners and developers, quick, what is the top line of what state energy offices can do?
I have a couple ideas because the states where we work, their energy offices have been great, very receptive, and having an open line of communication, certainly with, non-state-based programs, so like municipal and county programs, so that there's good communication and transparency on what's working and what's not at local levels. I do think something that we often encounter, we try as hard as we can to align with the weatherization programs, based on income eligibility and enabling, whenever possible, to have a robust portal of all the programs. So the utility assistance programs, the weatherization programs, to make it easier, one for municipalities, but also building owners and residents to get information about eligibility. I'll stop there.
I suppose if I were to kind of in line with kind of what we're talking about, it really is working with the contractors out there who can do the work. I do think it's really important that they're kind of along for the discussion. They're along for the journey, not necessarily just, creating these programs behind a desk, not really engaging with what is it real life, for the realities of a contractor and the world that we do, the work that we do. I often joke around about wanting to put somebody in my backpack so they can see, like, what is it for real, what is really happening out there on the job site, because there's so many things that are part of this that the programs may or may not understand. And so I think really a lot of getting the customers engaged really is about, hey, here are the contractors who really understand these programs and can actually move ahead with helping these projects happen.
Yep, wonderful. I'll keep mine short. I know we're about up to this clock here. I would say the biggest pain point I've had with property owners and decision makers for implementing projects is fidelity in the incentive flow, with a lot of, some breakbacks and administrative changes, this government shutdown, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so as much as possible, just being transparent, and things change. Like if there's going to be a change, be very transparent about that. And, bad news doesn't get better with time. And so if there is going to be a change, just again, be very open about that with property owners and, obviously the trade ally network as well that's implementing it. And just making sure there's no surprises so that we don't impact future programs or future funding participation and have that bad experience. I think that would be very critical. I hear that every single day from property owners. I did that, the LED, whatever, they burnt down, 20 years ago. They were remembering the first LED. So again, just being very transparent, and if things change, they change. But just being able to communicate and have that line of communication, I think would be very key.
Excellent and very sound advice. Well, thank you to Nick, Britton, and Abby for your time and expert advice to all of us in this very important subject. And with that, I'm going to toss it back to Alana and the NASEO team.
Thank you so much, Ross. And just echoing your thanks for our panelists and tacking on a thank you to you as well, Ross, for moderating such a wonderful discussion today. I know we're past time, but just a quick reminder that our next call is this upcoming Wednesday, October 15th from 1 to 2. We hope to see you all there. But thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.